Survival horror is a genre that I grew up alongside but have stayed away for many years. I loved late 2000s shooters like Dead Space, but have become disinterested in recent releases like the first-person Resident Evil, open-world zombie games, the multiplayer team horror, and the oversaturated indie horror scene. But the Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space remakes began a spark in me that is finally ignited with Cronos: The New Dawn, a survival horror game developed by Bloober team. Cronos is a dark, retro-futurist, post-apocalyptic survival horror game where you play the Traveler, an agent for a mysterious overseer called the Collective. It is your calling.
Such is our 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 calling.
To dive into time rifts to find key individuals that can help reveal the source of the change, a cataclysmic event that left the world devastated and turned people into grotesque monsters called orphans. The story has many twists and turns as you get closer to finding out how the change started, who you are, and what the Collective is, why the people you were looking for are important, and their stories. I feel that it works well to compel you to keep playing, but I didn't personally like the direction the story took near the end. I don't want to spoil too much, but it takes a big world-changing sci-fi event and makes it more about personal character relationships. This is fine on its own, but it doesn't solve a lot of the big questions or provide a conclusive ending. The game is set in Poland, and I do like the details in various reading material you find throughout the game that reference real-life events like the martial law that occurred in 1981 and provide some political intrigue for a bit of tangential learning if you're interested in that. It also deals with political themes, government overreach during a pandemic, and topics such as dread and loss. The gameplay is reminiscent of Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space, although returning to the roots of survival horror with a slower pace focused on scares and atmosphere. The deformed humanoid monster design and body horror is inspired by the necromorphs of Dead Space and the 1982 film The Thing. The indoor environments feel oppressive and claustrophobic, and larger outdoor areas feel mysterious due to a metric ton of fog. Now, it's not as cool and immediately iconic as a derelict spacecraft, but the old European brutalism that is now abandoned and left to time, occasionally adorned with the future technology of the Travelers, creates an interesting combination. Lighting, shadow, and fog effects are really great, and even make something as simple as an abandoned hospital or a large factory have a real presence. The sound design is some of the best I've heard recently. From crunchy footsteps and guns assembling to distant monster noises, the disturbing sounds will keep you on edge and keep you guessing where the next threat is coming from, until you hear the repetitive yet familiar droning tone of the safe room theme. You cannot rest. This is a linear game and all the monster encounters are scripted, but there are plenty of off-the-main-path secrets to be found. There is some backtracking, but most of the game is kept fresh by cleverly routing you through the areas, except for a few missions that require you to go through an area multiple times.
This is getting repetitive.
As the Traveler, you can manipulate time rifts to solve puzzles and fend off orphan attackers with a small inventory of weapons and abilities. You will also get to use your time rift abilities to reconstitute explosive barrels to use. Classic survival horror games have always been about inventory management and surviving with very little resources. You will usually have enough resources to survive, but you will never feel that you have enough to thrive, especially in Cronos, as you are constantly managing inventory space, time, and the space between you and your enemies. Your Traveler moves slow, has almost no melee attack power, and never has enough inventory space or ammo. Lack of crafting materials often force you to choose between crafting more ammo or a health pack, and choosing which upgrades to prioritize. Do you upgrade your defense, offense, or just another slot for a crowbar so you can unlock a door to pet the cat inside? Priorities. You start with a pistol that does little damage and you have to charge it. You have to get a charged headshot to get any real damage on the monsters. You will find more weapons later, but it takes a while to feel any kind of power fantasy in terms of weapon strength. As the player, you have a brain, or at least I hope so, and you will need to use it. The true power fantasy comes from cleverly routing a group of enemies and taking them out in expert fashion. But there are some encounters that are pretty crazy, so you will probably at some point end up panic firing into an enemy, running away, or just slowly walking through an area and hoping they don't see you. Cronos features the merging mechanic. Living enemies can merge and absorb dead enemies to become stronger. Even the weakest enemies in the game are now a threat. There are plenty of times when you have to keep the pressure up to avoid fighting a large group of overpowered enemies. The bosses are pretty average and boil down to lure them to the explosive barrels, expose and shoot the glowing weak spot. Not super inventive, but it does the job, and there are encounters later that are actually pretty interesting. I had a major bug late in the game where enemies would not attack me, and I had to reload my save to get things working properly again. After the first major boss, I was at low health, and I didn't have crafting materials, so I had to go through a 15 to 20 minute story-based section with all of the distracting low health warnings on screen. I played on PC, and someone always complains about the Unreal Engine 5 stutter, but luckily only about 5 times in the 20-hour playthrough did I notice any frame drops or issues. Now, I did play on medium settings because I had to record and play for many hours, but it ran fine for me.
Let our work continue.
Cronos: The New Dawn is a valiant effort to fill the dead space-shaped void that survival horror needs. Its world, visual and sound design, game mechanics, and the attention to detail in its resource economy are all outstanding, but the story, including some of the performances, is a bit hit and miss. It will work for some people, but I feel that it ultimately leaves too many ends unanswered and some potential unrealized. Overall, I understand why Bloober team gets its reputation. They have expertly merged many elements together to create a collective survival horror experience that is worth diving into. I give Cronos: The New Dawn 4 ignitable barrels brought back through a time rift and blown up again out of 5. I'm Dan T from Twisted Banana Productions. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk at you in the next video.